So, does anybody want Paul George? Because for a guy that I thought would be the most coveted actual free agent this offseason, not counting Pascal Siakam because I expected him to go back to the Pacers, not counting LeBron because I expect him to opt out and go back to the Lakers. If you take those two guys out, I would rank Paul George as the best free agent in the entire class, yet it seems like his market isn't really there right now. Now, as of today, the only team that could actually sign Paul George to a contract would be the LA Clippers. Free agency hasn't actually opened yet, but teams are allowed to negotiate with their own free agents. And considering that the Clippers have to deal with James Harden's free agency, they also signed Kawhi to an extension this time last year, it seems strange that they haven't dealt with the Paul George situation yet. Now, the rumors suggest that this is a contract length issue between Paul George and the Clippers. They don't want to give him the 4th year on a full maximum contract. If they were to do that, then I'm sure Paul George would have already signed the deal. Like I said, they signed Kawhi a year ago to an extension, and if they were willing to step up and give a competitive offer to Paul George, he probably would have a contract with the Clippers right now. And although I understand the Clippers' hesitancy to give someone like Paul George that long of a contract on another max deal when things just haven't gone well for them when it comes to injuries or postseason success, I do find it strange that it seems like other teams around the league are hesitant to give him a big contract as well, at least a long, big contract. Because even though you have durability concerns and injury issues to deal with Paul George, he's still an all-NBA caliber player, and in a free agency class that isn't particularly strong at the top, I expected him to, like I said, be one of the most, if not the most coveted actual free agents on the market. Now, there is an obvious answer as to why Paul George has not signed a new contract with the Clippers yet, and it doesn't even necessarily have anything to do with the contract that they have or have not offered him. It's just that he wants to go somewhere else. He's tired of the Clippers' experience. He's tired of Kawhi not being healthy. James Harden hasn't exactly been the most durable guy over the last handful of seasons, nor the easiest guy to play with. And I think it's easy to see a scenario in which Paul George just wants to go somewhere else on what will probably be his last big contract, his last chance to truly enter free agency as a coveted player. And that place might be the Philadelphia 76ers. It is a very clean fit there in Philadelphia. We've talked about the possibility of them getting someone like Klay Thompson, but if they could get Paul George, he is much better than any of their other free agency options. If they want to commit to using a significant amount of their cap space on just one guy, he is someone that certainly is at the top of the list to kind of bridge that gap between Maxey and Embiid. Then they use the rest of their cap space to fill out the roster, and suddenly that is a Philadelphia team that looks very, very dangerous with Paul George there. But then we get rumors and reports that the Sixers maybe aren't all that into the idea of bringing in someone like Paul George, and that they're also concerned about giving out that length of a contract. And this time of the year, all that stuff could be smokescreens. It could be to try and get Paul George on a better number. It could be because they've already agreed basically with Paul George and they don't want the league to think that anything is going on. There's 100 different reasons why that might be the case, that there would be a report coming out that they're not actually that excited about Paul George. But it just seems strange to me. Now, the other possibility for Philadelphia specifically is just that they have someone else they'd rather have. They think they have a really good chance of getting OG Anunoby, and they think that that is a better option for them in the long term in terms of him being younger, in terms of maybe having him be a little bit cheaper, not be on a full max, or they want to split up that salary cap space into a handful of players rather than just one max guy. Now, that goes in contrast of what Daryl Morey has historically done, whether it be in Philadelphia or elsewhere. He's always wanted stars. So again, it seems strange to me that Philadelphia would be reportedly out on bringing in Paul George. And apart from that, when it comes to max contract space teams, which is what it would take to get Paul George away from the Clippers, because they're offering him a max, just not a full 4-year max. And if the Sixers aren't willing to do the 4-year full max, if you're looking at other teams that have the cap space to make that happen, that also would be contenders with Paul George on the roster, there's not that many options out there. Like maybe Orlando. That's really it. If you think that the Magic would be a contender with Paul George there, you think that it's a decent fit, whatever the case may be. I personally think that is a super weird fit when you combine his on-ball creation with Paolo and Franz. Like, yes, he can shoot and he can guard, but that's just a really weird combination of players. And outside of that, and outside of Philadelphia, it seems like the Clippers are his only option. But of course, that's not actually the case, because there is one other scenario here that has started to gain some steam within the NBA community, and that is the possibility of an opt-in and trade from Paul George, where he ends up going elsewhere to a team that doesn't have cap space, to a team that would be a contender with him on the roster, but they would be able to bring him in just by trading pieces away, even though they don't have the salary cap space. This would be similar to the James Harden situation last offseason. And importantly, it is not a sign and trade, because those are much more difficult to work out underneath the cap space rules in the NBA. And opt-in and trade is much easier to work. And that opens up the possibilities for Paul George immensely. And there are three main teams here to keep an eye on that are always at the top of the list when you have a star player like this available. First and foremost would be the New York Knicks. It would be some kind of package revolving around maybe Julius Randle, Bogdanovich, and some picks. That doesn't sound super enticing. You also have the LA Lakers, where it could be Austin Reeves, Rui, some of the other younger guys like Jalen Hood-Schifino on the roster, and then some picks. And then you have the Miami Heat, which could be Jimmy Butler straight up in exchange for Paul George, or if they can figure out the JB situation, get him signed to an extension, then they could do Tyler Hero, maybe Duncan Robinson, and some picks. If you're not that excited about any of those possibilities, it's because they are all extremely unlikely. Because with the way that the rules are right now in the NBA, with the second apron and all these different things, it's really difficult to trade with the Clippers, and it's especially difficult to trade with the Clippers if you are also a team that is over the second apron. So even though the opt-in and trade is a nice other option for Paul George and the Clippers more specifically, because they would get something in exchange for George, it seems unrealistic and more so just a leverage point for him to try and get a deal that he wants from the Clippers or from another team. Now, obviously, there are other options in terms of potential opt-in and trade teams, but most of them are unrealistic in my opinion. New Orleans, Sacramento, Memphis, Golden State, like these are teams that might be kind of close to contenders, but maybe not with Paul George on the roster, and that would be a significant risk for those teams to trade away legitimate assets in exchange for a guy that has durability concerns that we've outlined throughout the video, as well as someone that you don't know if it's actually going to make you a contender or not. So realistically, at the end of the day, there are two options for Paul George and then maybe a third. The first is the Clippers step up and they give him the full 4-year max, and Paul George re-signs, returns to the Clippers within the next couple of days before free agency actually starts. The second option is Philadelphia steps up and offers him the 4-year full max, and he goes and signs with the Sixers. I think that when free agency opens, if we get there, if Philadelphia offers Paul George a full 4-year max contract, he will be a Philadelphia 76er. I think that is the only barrier between that happening, if that's actually what Philly wants to do. They also have other options, as we've discussed throughout the video, but if they decide Paul George is their guy and they give him the 4-year deal that the Clippers don't want to give him, he will be a Sixer. The third option would be that opt-in and trade scenario that we discussed, which seems pretty unlikely. And then the kind of random fourth option would be the market isn't actually there for Paul George. The Clippers don't offer him the 4-year deal, and he comes back on a 3-year deal with a fourth, either lower than max or non-existent or non-guaranteed 4th-year deal for Paul George. All of which to say, this is a very weird situation for a player as talented as he is and as coveted as I thought he would be, with a handful of teams that do have max salary cap space. It is very strange in this new era of the NBA with the second apron and these more restrictive rules for teams trading away players. It is a very strange market and situation right now around Paul George.